For the most part, AI in Hollywood is regularly spoken of as a fear lurking round the corner, like that guy who scares Patrick Fischler in Mulholland Drive. You know the one I mean. But as recent reports from Vulture and The Wrap have suggested, despite the other year's writers and actors strikes, artificial intelligence is already embedded in the creative pipeline and worming its way into mainstream productions in ways that would be sure to get Ethan Hunt breaking out in a nervous sweat. I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and with me today to discuss the genie unbottling AI event that is taking place right now is Joshy B, Josh Brown himself. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing well, but I'm a lot more nervous and scared after seeing this news, Ewan, I cannot lie.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of confirmed the worries that I think a lot of us have had for at least the past year, that this stuff is already present in the media that we're consuming. It's just not quite as clear-cut or right in your face as you may expect it to be, and it's kind of making me feel like one of those old people on Facebook not being able to differentiate between what's real and what's fake anymore, Ewan.
Look, this baby's doing so. Look, this baby's an entrepreneur. It's gonna take my job. That's literally an advert I saw on the Work X account the other day. That was just an AI image of the boss baby in live action form, basically. But yeah, no. The whole reason we're talking about this today is that there appears to have been a real shift in attitude in regards to the studios and producers and even creators themselves in Hollywood. If you recall back to when we had the writers and actors strikes, I believe that was 2023. There was kind of a general attitude from Hollywood of like, oh yeah, no, we're kind of interested in this. And then afterwards, there was kind of a ring fence put around it. There were protections in place. There were agreements made with the studios that, actors couldn't just be licensed ad nauseum. They had to be specific agreements that, it would have to be on the actors' terms first. And that, Hollywood couldn't use AI just to create full scripts or create movies in general. But as the technology has improved, and also as costs on productions continue to spiral, there's kind of been a big sort of, well, if you can't beat them, let's join them. So yeah, in both The Wrap and Vulture's report, they talk about this, saying how studios and producers have gone from kind of quietly and nervously and ashamedly, putting their fingers together and going, ooh, woo, maybe a little bit of AI, please. They are now openly parading the technology at various events in the Hollywood area and are more confident and comfortable in terms of actually talking to AI startups, especially Amazon, who had an appearance at a recent AI event. And yeah, this is from one of the conference panelists. They say, quote, as one conference panelist put it, the industry has reached a come to Jesus moment where the technology has become too useful to ignore. Now, this use extends from pre-production in the conceptual planning phase, so stuff where you would have concept artists, storyboarders, and it goes through all the way to post. There are actual stories here of directors using AI VFX to replace traditional VFX. And obviously, Josh, you'll remember that Late Night with the Devil the other year, there was the whole snafu around that, how, various background elements, they'd used generative AI on the set, and that really took a shine off that movie for me.
I'm so pleased you mentioned it, because Late Night with the Devil is exactly what I was going to bring up in regards to this, because I remember when that controversy started getting some traction when the movie was coming out, and a lot of people were saying, that's a hard line for me, like you said, it's taken the shine off it, I don't want to support this movie anymore. And a lot of people on the other side of the conversation were saying, what do you mean? It's only a few posters here and there. It's not impacting the overall script or the way it was shot or the actors. It wasn't infringing on what was deemed to be the majority of the creativity that was coming from that film. And I think a lot of people rightly pointed out that once you start allowing it into films, it goes beyond, oh, we're just using it here and there, to, well, we've already created a baseline for this technology. Why don't we just then eventually get to the point where we can eliminate entire departments? We can use AI for the VFX. And that was also seen in an argument, I think it was last year as well, where it was kind of coming out that a lot of industries, gaming and film, were using it for the conceptual stage, pre-production, kind of replacing concept artists or kind of encouraging concept artists to use AI to get a feel for the movie. And again, the argument was, well, it's pre-production. This is just helping us. It's just a guide. And you can see the escalation, I think, from event to event as this thing has crept in to the point where now it's kind of deemed acceptable for some executives to say, no, we're going to use AI now for VFX, an entire artistry and industry in and of itself. And I think it's kind of proving a lot of those people who kind of were up in arms at Late Night in the Devil correct years on.
Yeah, we're kind of in a full-on entity situation right now. We need Ethan Hunt to save us. But yeah, no, you're totally right. And I think we were all aware, it was like being gaslit by the studios around that time, because it was like, oh, it's just a few images here or there. And now we had, Jeffrey Katzenberg is talking about how, AI could, produce 90% of like an animated movie. And the reason why this is happening is you mentioned the cost aspect there. The big thing we keep hearing from all these different companies is that, oh, it's too expensive to make movies and TV shows now. We need to use this technology because otherwise we won't have movies at all, which for me feels really disingenuous. There are surely other solutions here, and I think, the more that we trade our human soul, as it were, for the machinery that is going on, we might as well just pack everything up and go home. But the other thing here is that they're doing it because they know that they can get away with it, or they think they can get away with it. Because I think, hopefully, as an optimist, I feel like they're underestimating the tastes and perceptibility of the movie-going public. I could be wrong here because everyone seems to have motion smoothing on their TVs when I go over to their houses. And
Despite Tom Cruise telling you to turn it off, by the way.
Despite Tom Cruise doing that, I should really become a superhero who just breaks into people's houses and just turns the motion smoothing off. That's not
I think
illegal.
those already exist. They're called television calibrators, and you can hire them to come to your house, as far as I'm aware.
There we go. That's what I'm pivoting into if AI steals my job. But this is from Vulture. Quote, in an era of Netflix glut and endless Marvel spin-offs, there's the question of how much quality still matters to studio heads or the viewing public. I spoke to one VFX artist and technologist who advises studios on how to incorporate AI into their workflows. He asked to remain anonymous because, as he put it, most of the stuff I'm doing is locked in NDAs. Lately, he said, when a director asked for a small element, a swirl of smoke or a spark of flame, he would create it using generative AI. It didn't look as good as it would have if he'd used traditional VFX software like Houdini or Maya, but he didn't think most people would notice the difference. Quote, oh, there's quality lost, he said, but that's only lost on the people who appreciate it. Like fine wine. And I feel like this whole continually underestimating the audience thing, it's an extension of kind of like, the superhero glut that we've had recently. Not to say that all superhero movies are bad, but certainly in regards to, franchise, IP, only rehashing stuff that we know it works. There's a general creative malaise, and I think that in itself is what's going to cause issues here. It's not that production itself is more expensive. I think the fact that we are coddling viewers and talking down to them and patronizing them, I think that's what's feeding all of this, and is ultimately thinking, well, we can get away with it, and that'll be fine.
I think the VFX situation is really interesting because, to me, the issue, if there is an issue with VFX right now, is an issue that has been created by the studios and the production pipelines that they've put in place that are, quite frankly, unreasonable for the actual workers and employees to stick to and produce something that is of high quality. Like, I know this is quite a charged word, perhaps, but I do think there's kind of been a war on VFX houses and VFX artists from the big studios and not adapting to the human reality of what it takes, both from a personal level and a cost level, to create VFX for top studios.
The crunch on Marvel and stuff.
The crunch on Marvel and stuff, and you have seen in real time the special effects on those Marvel movies and other movies decline as the deadlines have gotten tighter, as the working conditions have gotten more crunched, like you said, and perhaps more importantly, from the reports that are out there and you can go and read, from just a kind of fundamental misunderstanding of how VFX is, created in the first place. You get all of those stories about directors and executives coming in with last-minute changes, and the VFX people are like, well, that's going to take time, and they're like,
well,
no,
buddy,
you're going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've changed our mind on this big sequence. The script that we sent you, forget about it. We need to scramble, and we need to hit our release date. And I worry that it's kind of creating this self-fulfilling prophecy where studios have kind of treated VFX houses in a strange way for a long time, arguably not respected that art form, and now they're saying, well, audiences think these special effects are bad anyway. why don't we just cut all of that out and do AI ones that are maybe slightly worse, but if people are complaining anyway, and we're going to get crap for hiring all these people to produce subpar special effects because of the conditions that we've implemented, why not get rid of it? And I think that is an easy justification for a problem that they have created in the first place, right? I don't think this would have necessarily flown even like a decade ago, where the technology VFX artists were working with was worse, but they had more time and money to complete the effects, so they arguably looked better, right? And I don't think we've seen, in my opinion, maybe the recent Avatar movie, but a VFX house given the time and the money to create something truly spectacular with the incredible tools that they have at their disposal, which makes it incredibly easy for the executives to then say, well, we'll just switch to AI because it kind of looks comparable now.
Yeah, totally. It's just, it's completely baffling to me because, like you say, it does feel like a problem made of their own, it's of their own making. And I think there is a general mentality attitude going on here where it's a case of like, well, costs are increasing, this, that, and the other, and the solution from executives and producers and people who sit at the very top of Hollywood's pyramid isn't to, okay, let's protect our investments, let's invest in people, let's make sure that we're continuing and preserving this creative industry. It is purely a profit game. It is purely, how much can we extract out of said thing? And I know that Hollywood is a business. I know this is how capitalism functions. I wasn't born yesterday. But I think there is there was ways before of marrying this stuff together and making sure that we were, at the same time, fulfilling a commercial need, but also satisfying a creative impulse. And that's how you get, auteurs. It's how you get it's why we respond to cinema in the first place. Yeah. And it feels as though that is being shunted into the background, which is even more depressing considering those auteurs who have, developed cinema as we know it over the last, think of like the Hollywood New Wave. All these people are going away now.
Yes.
We're in a transitional, generational moment, right? And it feels as though you've got these people like Scorsese, kind of holding back the flood, and the studios are just waiting for everyone to leave, and they can embrace the next slop era.
That's a good point. It feels like a waiting game. It feels like we're going to start seeding this now, so when there isn't that level of dissent in the industry itself, we can just go whole hog with it because we know a lot of the audience may accept it. But I don't even necessarily believe that acceptance is going to be there, like you mentioned a little while ago, because that kind of allure to auteur filmmaking, for lack of a better phrase, I think is there still. Like, people gravitate towards movies that have an artistic core to them, like the Dune movies, for instance, got so successful based on a kind of impenetrable, nerdy book series that had a history of flops behind it, but people were really impressed by how original it felt and how much of a distinct feel both of those films had. And in my opinion, you can see in Dune Part 2, the director Denis Villeneuve just go absolutely mad creating spectacles that you would expect from a Chris Nolan film, doing things with practical and special effects that genuinely, funnily enough, don't feel like they could have been made by an AI. And you see people flock to those kinds of films. I mentioned Chris Nolan there. The fact that Oppenheimer, an R-rated 3-hour biopic that's half in black and white, the fact that made $1 billion is crazy. And I know it's easier said than done for executives to go out and find people that you can gravitate towards that can consistently pump out both commercially successful and artistically impressive movies. But it's not like when you do find one of those people, like, they don't bring in the money. We have found, like you said, that marriage of artistry and commercial viability over the past few years, but it feels like that's a lesson the studios are very hesitant to learn because probably what you mentioned, with it being cheaper to just ignore that reality and go down this route.
I think it's a cultural collision between an art-making community and a tech industry thing. And I think, the more that your Bezoses, your different, your Googles, your whatever, kind of your Johnny Googles, the more that they get into the apparatus of Hollywood and the more that the studios acquiesce to those demands in pursuit of profit, the worse this is going to get. And there is another really good quote here from the Vulture article where there was a quote from a Hollywood insider there basically saying, "I've listened to executives say, so can we load a season of scripts into AI and it can churn out a show in a day?" And I'm just like, is that what you want? Meanwhile, all the people under them who are also invited to listen walk out of those meetings wanting to take a shower. So the takeaway from that is that even though the situation right now feels as though it's an inevitable tide, and as much as it's inevitable in the sense that these studios are actively choosing this and people are just giving up, there are still plenty of people in Hollywood who don't want this to happen. So that's the one thing that I'm holding on to here. I really, really hope that this cultural heist does not take place because I really, really need, this medium to continue being the amazing thing that it is. The other thing worth noting here as well is that one thing that they're really kind of hinging the next era of video generative AI on are ethical AI models. We've seen Natasha Lyonne, who's broken my heart with all this AI stuff recently, getting involved in her own ethical AI company, which is only scraping material from licensed copyrights and copyrights that have been surrendered to this process, but also, copyright-free material. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, you can maybe make friends with the dangerous animal, but it's still going to bite your arm off at one point or another. There is no compromising with this. And again, I know I'm sounding more and more like Ethan Hunt if he wasn't really cool and was from the northwest of England, but the naivete on display here is just really, really frustrating. And I think it's the most disappointing thing from these recent reports is that artists, people like James Cameron, people like Ben Affleck, people like Natasha Lyonne, people who are involved in really creative, influential aspects of Hollywood, they're treating this as if it's another technological advance in the same way that George Lucas pioneered VFX with ILM, and it's a completely different kettle of fish. And I think that, more than anything, is the big kind of oof moment.
And I think what's frustrating is there's that element of naivete that you mentioned there. It also pained me to see Natasha Lyonne talk about this stuff. But what also hurt was the fact that, she can say that now. She can say it's ethical because currently her job isn't at risk. It's unlikely she's going to be replaced by AI on the next season of Poker Face or whatever it is. But currently, by using AI, even if it is ethical, even if it is in-house, that eventually will ultimately replace the people who were doing the work and who provided the content in many cases for that to exist at some point. And like you said, that escalation almost certainly will happen and go up the chain, but it's just, I find it frustrating because it feels like it's a case of, well, my job isn't currently at risk, but I'm okay with putting your job at risk, and that's fine because it's in pursuit of art or whatever. But going back to the idea of ethical AI, I think that was maybe the initial biggest hurdle that a lot of these studios had to get over, was the fact that it was pulling in copyrighted material, and as response, you got a lot of people throughout multiple different industries saying, okay, we'll build our own models in-house, we'll get people in to essentially work to provide us art to replace themselves. And that's where it becomes kind of dystopian to me. I'm not sure if you saw this news story from last week, I think, Ewan, where it was someone who was on a UK train line that had an AI voice announcer.
Oh, it was on ScotRail.
Yes, ScotRail. An AI voice announcer. But the person whose voice was used for that AI model came out and said, they own my voice, I guess, because they must have done some voiceover work for the company previously, and they've done this. But at a certain point, I was available. I could have just done it. You could have hired me to produce this, and that's what I have a lot of trouble with when it comes to kind of trying to justify the concept art stage. It's you can, but you can also just hire a person to come in and do it and probably get better results, like you mentioned. And I just find that a very stretch of the definition of ethical, in my opinion.
It's just totally vampiric. But hey, Zaslav needs his £60 million paydays. So,
what are you going to do,
to invest in a new generation of creative talent and safeguard one of the most important creative mediums on the planet? Or does an exec need another, maybe a couple mil? I'll leave that answer to you guys. What do you think of all this AI malarkey? Let us know down in the comments below, and also let me know if you need me to come around and fix your motion smoothing on your TV, because there is a TV that I've encountered that I have not been able to get,
to punch into shit.
Like the video, subscribe. We're going to be around forever, really. That's kind of...
I hope so. We're going to be like the Entity at some point. We will be doing content out of this telly at a point 30 years down the line.
AI Brown. Terrifying thought.